So in 2004, I quit my job. And I had followed a fairly traditional corporate career path until then. I studied finance and engineering, and I worked in investment banking, and then got my MBA here at Columbia. And I was then working at a big consulting firm. And I love my work, and I love the people that I worked with. But two things happened in 2004. The first was that I got clear on what my purpose is, and it's that people love what they do. And the second thing is I wrote my first book. And it took me 7 years to write this book. And I didn't know if I was going to write another one. So I wanted to make sure that I got the most out of this moment. And I remember sitting in the office with my manager explaining what my passions were and what I wanted to do, and asking, is there a way that we can somehow incorporate this into my work at the firm? And he explained to me very nicely, politely, but clearly, they would be happy to support me as long as I did it on my own time. So I quit. And I became an entrepreneur. It kind of made sense that I would have to become an entrepreneur in order to do what I wanted to do. We kind of have this idea that it is entrepreneurs that are the innovators, and a lot of people will support this view, that you just cannot change the world, you cannot impact things from inside established organizations. Clayton Christensen, the Harvard innovation guru that coined the term disruptive innovation, he says that it's the very decision-making and resource allocation processes that are key to the success of large organizations that hinder their ability to accept disruptive innovations. And John Hagel, another innovation guru, he talks about innovation antibodies that emerge around new ideas when they're introduced inside an established company. And so there's a lot of support for this view that really the innovator is this person. Their story is remarkably similar. Why they're all white men is a topic for another day. But let's break down their story. Sometime in college, they get a big idea. They leave college. Sometimes before they finish, they go to the West Coast with that idea, and they step into a garage. There are a couple people there with him. We have the hacker, we have the hipster, we have the hustler, and they build this solution, and then they launch a company, and they disrupt the big guys. We love to tell this story, and I was living that story, doing what I love to do. I then started a firm, I wrote 3 more books, and we were going around the world delivering these innovation workshops. And we could get people to think very differently, but really secretly, we knew that the ideas that would come out from the managers that we brought together really wouldn't lead anywhere. And they always hit that bureaucracy that would kill off the innovative idea, right? Now, 3 years ago, something changed. I got a phone call from someone named Jean Fuel. And she challenged me. She said, you think that the the entrepreneur is the artist, because they have the freedom to mix things together to create new things. And you think that as organizations get bigger, that they ask people to paint within the lines. And then ultimately, they ask employees to just do their job. Right? If you are a lawyer, be a lawyer. If you are an accountant, be an accountant. If you're a marketer, be a marketer. But she shared with me a story that came out of a workshop that I delivered with her. And she had proven this view wrong. This innovation, she's an editor at Macmillan, and her innovation made it through into the market and was celebrated as one of the most major innovations in publishing, featured on BBC, on NPR. And so it got me thinking, is she just the outlier? So I went to meet with her in her office and spoke to her and her boss to understand what the path was that she went through to introduce this innovation. And what she shared really challenged much of what I thought was the path of innovation. Right? I thought that she would be the outlier, that really it is the entrepreneur that innovates. And employees have difficulty doing that. So to test her theory, she was challenging me, was I looked at the 30 most transformative innovations over the last 30 years, as judged by a panel of Wharton professors based off 1,000 submissions. And these are the big innovations, right? These are the internet, email, DNA sequencing, MRIs, the big innovations. And I said, is it really the entrepreneur that conceives of this idea? So I followed these paths, and what I found that only 8 of these disruptive innovations were conceived of by entrepreneurs, 22 of them by employees. If it were not for employee innovators, you woke up in the morning, you would not have a mobile phone to reach for. That phone would not connect to the internet. You would not be able to send an email. If you got sick, you would not be able to get an MRI. You would not be able to get a stent. You wouldn't be able to go to an ATM. The world is a much better place because of employee innovators. And we don't know that. We don't celebrate them. Who then builds the idea? The entrepreneur builds 7 of these. What happens at that point is some combination of people in academia and institutions and the employee start building it, and then who then takes it to market is the competition. So if we want to say, what's the real path of innovation? What we have to say, if we want to be truthful, is an employee comes up with an idea, they partner with an academic to develop the idea, and then the competition takes it and sells the idea. And the problem is only that that's not a very sticky story. It's not the kind of story that we like to tell, right? We like the story of the hero lone innovator. And so you could say, well, that's just the way it is. But this propagation of a story that's not true has a cost. 70% of employees are disengaged at work. That costs the U.S. economy $450 billion in lost productivity. To put that into context, take the revenue of Google, Amazon, Boeing, and GE, put it all together, and it's less than $450 billion. But there's also a humanitarian cost, a social cost to this. When people are disengaged at work, they increase worker safety. They have anxiety. They have depression. It damages family relationships. So I wanted to understand, what is this path, right? And I first assumed, as I think many people do, is that those who did innovate, they followed some innovation process. Right? Companies spend about $350 billion on incubation labs and accelerators and incubators, right? And we got chief innovation officer. I figure that's the path by which employees can innovate from within. But what I found is actually that often what they do is they help the system get out of the way. They don't follow the system. Chuck House, for example, in 1962, at that time, he was an engineer at HP in the R&D lab who was working on something called a large-scale electrostatic display. And Mr. Packard came to visit his R&D center, as he did every year, and he saw this project. He didn't like it. And he said, I don't want to see this project in the R&D lab next year. What he meant was, I want you to kill this project. And what did Chuck interpret that to mean? I have 12 months to get this into the market. And so what he did on his own time, on his own dime, over Christmas holiday, is he took one of these things, took it on a plane, showed it to customers, came back in January with orders, and now it was in the market. Nobody asked him to do that. But it's because he did that that we saw a man land on the moon for the first time. If he hadn't done that, that technology would not have been adopted, and we would have only heard Neil Armstrong say, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Eventually, he wins the Medal of Defiance by HP, awarded in extraordinary defiance in the face of adversity, beyond the expectation of what an engineer should, and laid the foundation for a technology revolution. So why do they do that? So we know that they don't follow the system. So why do they push for it, even though the company's not asking them for it? It seems to be that they do it for a higher cause. Because unfortunately, they don't get rich from doing this. You might think that they want to do it for the bonus, but they don't do it for the bonus. Kat Cole, she is the CEO of a company called Fortune Brands. They own Carvel, Cinnabon, and a few other brands. Before that, she was the CEO of Cinnabon. But she started her career as a waiter at Hooters. Her single mom didn't have enough money to support the family, so she had to get a second job. And she describes a moment early in her career when the cooks in her restaurant went on strike. They left, and half of the waiters, they figured there's no food to cook, so they hung up their aprons and left. But the other half, what did they do? They went into the kitchen to cook. And she went into the kitchen. This is what these internal innovators seem to do. They go into the kitchen in service of something bigger. Sometimes it is the organization. Sometimes it's something even bigger than that. Heather Davis, she is an executive at TIAA. She's been behind some really major innovations, which, unfortunately, for confidentiality reasons, I can't talk about, but I can talk about this one. She owns, through her group, she owns $25 billion in agricultural real estate. They're the largest owner of agricultural real estate in the world. They own more wineries than anyone else in the world. And she also has a son who's autistic. So when she learned that her farms were having difficulty finding workers, it became immediately obvious to her that this type of work, this farm work, is the perfect kind of work for autistic people. So she got her company to launch a program called Fruits of Employment that found fulfilling work for people with autism and help farmers meet their issue and help the company in the same way. So what they're doing is they're serving something bigger. So there is evidence to say that it is actually advantageous, rather than quit your job, to pursue to change the world from inside an established organization. When organizations start off, they're startups, they're disruptors, they take risks. As they grow, they introduce bureaucracies, they start narrowing tasks, they tightly narrow those tasks. But if they get bigger, there are four things that come into play. You will have, if you decide not to quit, you'll have scale that entrepreneurs can only dream of. You'll have capabilities, technology, and experts to tap that would be hard to get as an entrepreneur. You have innovation resources that entrepreneurs have to continually fundraise for. And you have the ability to diversify risk, to take multiple bets and reduce the risk of driving innovation from within. And the good news is that we are at the cusp of a new stage in the evolution of the corporation, of the organization in general. There are technologies that are starting to accelerate the pace of change around our organizations. And if you think about it, most of our organizations are still run like centrally planned economies, where we have one central authority who decides how to distribute capital and labor and capabilities and technology. And we know this doesn't work. But corporations are evolving. Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka, he talks about that as the pace of change accelerates exponentially, that the old ways of organizing and educating are dying. Many organizations are going to die, except for those that are able to activate internal innovators. And so I interviewed, so far, 150 internal innovators. And I asked each one, what is the biggest barrier that you face to innovating? And this lays out a framework. I call it the Innovate framework. Of course, as a consultant, I've got to turn it into an acronym. So I'm going to lay out Innovate. You'll see there's one N that's missing. I couldn't figure out how to get that N in, but if you have an idea, I'd love to hear it. And so I laid out these 7 barriers that they seem to repeat often, and what they point is to the contours of a new form of organization. Under intent, organizations that survive in the future are going to give employees their intent back. They're going to turn employees into entrepreneurs. Under needs, we're going to evolve from complex strategic plans that no one can understand into simple statements of purpose that tell our employees what the company and the world need. As we get to options, we're going to see options and ideas not coming from boardrooms, but coming from hallways. We're going to see value not being delivered in just one way, but many different ways of delivering value, that you can create value for your organization and the world. We're going to move from a model in which, instead of companies asking people to prove their idea before they can take action, they're going to recognize that innovations require you to take action in order to prove the idea. Teams, we're going to move from hierarchical, siloed structures in towards agile teams that can move quickly and reconfigure at will. And we're going to see an environment evolve. We're going to shift from a centralized economy into open platforms where employees can find opportunities, rally resources to change things. In other words, what we're going to see is the shift in organizations from asking employees to paint within the lines towards allowing them to paint outside of the lines. And now, I'm not saying that I necessarily made the wrong choice by quitting my job. But what I am saying is that you and nobody should have to choose.